My name is Surajit Mukhopadhyay, and I teach sociology at a university in India. And I've been doing so for the last 30 odd years. The journey of an academic, the personal take of an academic in the 21st century, especially those who are pursuing social sciences and humanities. We are misfits in a society that has completely been taken over by corporatization. Everything that we do in academics, everything that we do in healthcare, everything that we do for education in this country, like most of the world, is now driven by corporate passion. Corporate passion is another word for greed, for profit making. And we who entered academia many moons ago, as it were, did not come to teach or do research because we thought that there would be profit in the making. What made us tick? And I think that that's a very important question to ask, because I think it's a moral dilemma. Do we do what we came out to do from the universities? Or do we pursue things that have been now dictated to us, told to us? I remember when I entered college as an undergraduate, studying political science as my major subject. And we were all enthused, because we went into a college, but more importantly because we could listen to lectures which resonated with us, with the thoughts that came out from our professors, the books that we read, to this whole understanding of Indian society and politics. And yet we didn't know what we had to do with the subject that we were learning. And I remember one professor of mine, the late Kushal Kumar Sengupta, who said, there is a world in academics. It is not about, where you get placed and what kind of jobs you do, which of course is important. But more importantly, academia is also about learning, about transforming yourself. And we were doing this conversation in Kolkata in the aftermath of the emergency, just about 5 years down the line. People were passionate about change. People thought about change as necessary. And everything that we learned, whether we learned physics or whether we did mathematics or whether we did political science or philosophy or literature, it was imbued with that kind of understanding of change. It is very different today, of course. I was invited to a party where someone asked me a couple of just years back as to what we should be advising a young boy who has just done his honors in economics. And before I could answer, someone in that party said, oh, he should go for a certain bank. They were paying 80,000 rupees per month to young graduates who come out with economics. That comes this kind of a reply. Everything is to be weighed in terms of what you earn and what you can get out of life in material terms. When we were students, if someone asked, what can you do with economics? I'm sure the advice would have been, well, you can go to D school, or you can go to Calcutta University, or you can go abroad and you can do research and, and teach. So we have deviated quite a lot in terms of our commonsensical understanding of what constitutes the reason for why we, educate ourselves and why we do social sciences. And this was the thing that was brought home to me by my professor, Sengupta, when I was at St. Xavier's College. He could make me understand the distinction between being educated trying to increase the quantum of knowledge, giving us the confidence that you can be a producer of knowledge, a contributor to humankind in terms of knowledge, which would have effect beneficial to mankind. And that, I think, was the moral imperative. Subsequently, on his advice, I went to the famous Jawaharlal Nehru University to do my master's in sociology. And I learned not only in the classroom but outside the classroom as well. We had this fantastic library which was attached to our canteen, and we learned a lot, sitting amongst friends and talking, wasting time as it were, formally, but engaging in passionate debates, trying to learn from each other, not for what we would end up with as a corporate job, not in that bank for 80,000 rupees per month, but economics and sociology and political science and whatever it was that was being discussed for the kind of knowledge that was being generated. We fought for our professors, we fought against our professors, ideologically, on the basis of ideas. But one thing was certain, which I could see, and which was a continuity from my experience in Kolkata, or then Calcutta, that we are all doing this because there's injustice in this world. And I think that that is the most important thing that education does to us. It tells us that there are many more things important outside the immediate ken of one's own living. That there's a world outside to which we have to connect. And so, in JNU, we continue to understand ourselves in a relationship to the idea that there is injustice and that we may have a role to play, even if a very small one at that, in creating a just world. And we banked upon institutions to do so. Institutions like JNU, institutions which were guided by this spirit of changing the world for the better, for standing by people who were marginal, people who didn't have a chance, but giving them a chance to be someone in this world. Today, however, we are lost in a sea of material greed. We are also, at the same time, lost in a sea of great mediocrity. And we are being told that there is no alternative to the corporatization of education. And indeed it is, when we see how universities after universities fall prey to this TINA factor, to this logic that there is no other way to survive except to sell courses, to make them relevant only for the market, to see to it that students are placed in proper jobs, as if the university has suddenly transformed itself into a large placement agency. So you come in as a youngster, you are taught what the market requires, and you come out and be placed, and the university is there to place you in a job. So much so that now I have encountered parents who would come and ask, what is the kind of placement that this university guarantees? Which is a far cry 30 years ago, when parents wouldn't have asked this question at all. In fact, they would have felt ashamed in asking this question. They would have thought that since the student had gone to an institution, they would study, and that study would empower them enough to go out in the world and get a job for themselves. However, commercialization spares none of us. And it builds upon this middle class passion for more and more of what constitutes for them consumptive items. This is, of course, not something absolutely new, to be fair to the middle class. I have umpteen times heard this being told all over the Indian middle class spread, that are you reading a book which is a storybook? So you're wasting time, right? What about your studies? And so you have a whole generation, not a whole generation, or a couple of generations of people who have never studied serious literature at all. I was once a selector for a prestigious management institute. Students went there to do their masters in business administration. And I made it a point to ask each and every one to name a book which they had read outside the syllabus, a book of serious literature in any language that they are familiar with. And none of them, believe me, none of them, in the 2 days that I sat there and listened to about 100 odd students, could name a book which would remotely connect them to the world of ideas. So you see, we have already killed the inquisitiveness, the imagination of our younger generation. And it is on this dead wood that privatization and corporatization is reigning. And when we say these things, I'm quite sure there's a world out there which would be laughing at us and saying, well, this is not what education is. Precisely the reason why we are the misfits in an education system, misfits in a world that do not care anymore for the sake of learning itself. We can only hope, for hope is eternal in the human breast. We can only hope that things would change, that a new dawn would arrive, that all these things that we are now afflicted with would be a thing of the past, and that we would again come back to being more humane, more sensitive, more sympathetic and empathetic, and put learning in the context of the needs of the human. Thank you very much for listening to me.